Hey, welcome to session 12 of the first stage of the Your Way Recovery program. So we've made it. We've made it through the first part. And the first part of this program is really about quieting the mind and making recovery possible and making it something that becomes achievable in our mind. When we're trying to overcome hyperactive fight or flight responses, when we're agitated or depressed or suffering, any of those things that actually drive addiction, then it is the first thing we need to do is calm down the mind, soothe the mind, and get it to relax a little so that we can do the deeper work, because we can't do the deeper work from that state of anxiety. So what we're going to do today is we're going to reconnect again with the last little bit of that class we've been covering. We'll do our centering first, and then we're going to look at a review of those phase one practices from those courses, those practices that soothe us when we're agitated. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction into what the phase two exercises are and the place they can bring it. And then over the next 12 classes, over the next section of the program, what we're going to do is we're going to combine a deeper look of the traditional 12-step program, which is an amazing program and brilliant. It is the most successful recovery program in existence. It has helped more people recover than any other program ever has. And so I want to talk about the pieces of it that help us recover and kind of some of the pieces that can get us stuck. So we're going to work through reviewing those steps, and then we're going to talk about what parts work and what parts we can improve so that we can finally free ourselves from addiction instead of feeling burdened by it our whole life. And so that's what we'll be going over. And then we'll be implementing those phase two practices that actually help to center the brain, help to calm the mind. So it'll be a great next step to your recovery. It's now where we start actually altering the brain function, the actual enlarged amygdala that's driving those addictive patterns, driving those dopaminergic pathways, to have healthier pathways. But we're going to do it not by approaching the struggles again. We're going to do it by approaching the brain function. And so this is the section of the course where you'll really feel the biggest impact. You're going to feel more than just placated. You're going to feel how it's different than other programs. So I'm going to go ahead and dig in with the centering. Again, then we'll cut over to that class, and then I'll come back with a take-home tool that helps to explain the transition from the first phase of what we've been doing and the next step we'll be taking. So congratulations again for coming this far. I do hope you continue, and I hope you feel significant impact in your life from the practices you're about to learn. So I invite you now to take a deep breath. Again, before we begin any advance to our practice, it's important to be centered. And to center the mind, we must first calm the mind. So allow yourself to come into the place of being centered, being in this moment right now. I just want you to take a moment and allow yourself to breathe. Using the count of 3, just a slow count of breathing in, 2, 3, and breathing out, 2, 3. Again, breathing in, 2, 3, and breathing out, 2, 3. One last time. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. If you need more time to become centered, if you need a few more breaths, remember you can always pause the video. You want to be calm as we continue. As we do, I allow the calm to wash over my mind. And I become fully present in this moment. Grounded and secure. I know I come to this place with strength and confidence. I've been strong. I've been sure. And now I feel present. I've been through a lot of things. I've struggled at times in life. And there are times where I have succeeded. And throughout the last 12 weeks, I've connected with an idea of possibility, of capability, that I can do this. From this place of knowing who I've been and what I've been capable of doing, I let that idea of what might be possible settle deep into the essence of my being. I accept the possibility. I see my own strength. I feel my commitment, and I recognize my capabilities. I can do anything I put my mind to. I can change the direction of my life, and I can find peace, harmony, and joy in how I live it. I know I can succeed. I can choose to commit to my own joy, to being successful, and living the life I deserve to live. From this place of knowing, I ask myself the question, if this next 12 weeks was the one thing between me and my perfect life, would I commit to it? If this was the only thing I had to do to find peace and happiness, would it be worth it? Is it worth it for me to try? You can pause the video now to answer that question. And for those of you that are only doing the centering today and doing the rest of the video throughout the week, you can complete your practice here for the day. For those of you that choose to continue, go ahead and pause the video, answer the question, and then you can return for the rest of the practice. You can pause the video now. So the very first part of this program that's the most important is understanding that our entire life experience is the result of a chemical. It's never the condition. If your boss is mistreating you and you're upset, it's a chemical. If someone in your life dies and you're sad, it's a chemical. Right? Even though the feelings, it doesn't mean that we don't experience real suffering. We're really in pain. But the reason we're in pain is the chemical reaction that's happening in the brain. So the first part of phase one is understanding that, really locking that in. Because if you don't understand that your life experience is a result of chemical, you can't take control of it, right? If we still blame it conditions, we now gave over all our power to the conditions. The second thing we're doing in phase one is gaining the ability to move from a fight or flight state to a rest and digest state at will. No matter how bad we're triggered, no matter what's happened, no matter how extreme. I'm talking about going from a complete panic attack or severe depression into a state of feeling safe and well. So we're going to talk about phase one practices. I'm going to give you a list of phase one practices, and I want to give you the general understanding of what they are. one of the things I stress here is that I don't teach the process. What I give is information, not instruction. Because what pulls any one of us out of a fight or flight state is going to be different. There is not one answer for everyone. And this is the problem with a lot of what's currently out there is it says do this one specific thing to get this one specific result, and it doesn't work for everyone. So people try thing after thing after thing and end up getting frustrated by it. So what I want to talk about is actual practices scientifically proven to release serotonin in the body, which puts you into a rest and digest state. Okay, the first one is lying on the floor. This is one of the best and works. Like, I'll talk about how as you advance in the phases, you have to start changing your early practices because you get more adept at them. But lying on the floor is a mechanism of the body that when the body gets under extreme duress, it makes you pass out, right? So if you get in too extreme a state where the body now is under threat of actually having something happen, the brain will make you lose consciousness and it'll buckle your knees and put you on the floor. But it won't work on a couch or bed. It has to be the floor because the brain has to perceive it as you've collapsed. Right. Well, something's happened. Also, if a tiger's chasing you, the last thing you're going to do is lay on it. You can put something on the floor, that's fine. And you can lay on the grass as long as and you can be on a third floor apartment, as long as your brain perceives it as the ground. I'm now on the floor, right? The second thing is understanding that what's causing this is sensory information combined with memory is what's caused the trigger in the first place. We can use that to trigger ourselves out of it. So what we want to create is a positive trigger. So we're going to use sensory information to do that. So for example, you can use smell. If there's a certain candle you like the smell of, essential oils, incense. If you sound, soothing music, listening to the sound of rain, listening to birds chirping, whatever is soothing to you. There are a lot of things out there on the area sound. There's binaural music, there's ASMR. Not everything works for everyone. Try different things. Like ASMR does not make me... I can't remember the initials, but what it is it's videos and it's whispering and combing hair and stuff like that. So it's low frequency noise, but
like a level above white noise or noise or something.
Yeah, and that's another thing is like I just listening to the noises. Like I like brown noise, but so it's like that, but it's just really quiet. And part of it I think is the strain of hearing it. So when you have to strain to hear something, it makes your systems calm down. So when you're like really listening really hard, straining to hear something. Now, some people, that's part of a triggered state, right? Where if they hear a noise in their house at night, straining to listen feels triggering. But there are stories like Calm, the app Calm has sleep stories where what they do is they start at a certain volume and cadence and they start to talk slower and lower the volume, which then makes your brain reach for hearing it, which then puts it in a calm state and actually puts you to sleep. You want personal sensory stuff that's pleasing to you. It can be visual. This is why a lot of people wear meditations. One of the other things I recommend is spiritual practice. So if you have one, this is the real power behind spiritual practices. If you don't have one, don't try and create one because you already need to have a faith base in it. But triggered states are very isolating. When animals are in a dying state, they wander off to die alone, and we tend to start to isolate ourselves. This is what's happening with depression and suicide, is this isolation. So reaching out to something bigger than ourselves starts to pull us out of the fight or flight state, right? Remember, social survival. So even if we're connecting with a higher being or a deity or a one mind concept, something like that, that will help pull us out. Other things. So you want to start stimulating the body's thinking mechanisms. So one of the things that's a primal survival mechanism. So again, primates being the weakest of the predators, what they developed in order to survive was intellect, to think through things, to problem solve, to be creative, to throw things. Judy's smiling because she knows. Yeah, so this is why we get monkey mind. We want to overthink things. We want to think them through, but that's a soothing state. So instead of getting wrapped in a cyclic thinking or ruminating, grabbing early development learning, because when you're triggered, you have no new thought available. Your brain's reacting according to training. So the part of the brain that has new ideas is off. And so we have what's already available to us. So just grab hold of early development skill and make it more complicated. So complicating thought helps us, but we don't want to go too complicated. So for example, doing the alphabet backwards, or counting complex ways, like count by random numbers like 7 or 8, or counting sums is one I really like. 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is 8, 16, 32. The reason why is it starts out easy and you're in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands pretty quickly. And so then you're having really to concentrate to try and hold on to those numbers. And if you lose it, then you just start over, right? Another thing is reading or audiobooks, but you don't want anything too complex. Again, you want early development, so reading can really fall in the area of distraction. So distraction is doing reading and recreational books, something like Harry Potter, not philosophy, not in this state. Another thing is filling in a predefined space. I'm going to reach over here. I meant to grab this before. Sorry, video people. Get my face right up there. But these books, these coloring books, in fact, you'll see. In fact, I had one over there that I usually keep. Oh, did you? Yeah. Anti-stress coloring books. So the whole purpose of these is to relax us. Now, there's a certain rule I want you to follow if you use one of these books. I have an example here, I think. No, I don't know where I did with it. But anyway, completely fill in the space and try and stay within the lines. So you don't want to just color and scribble, right? Completely fill in each space and try to stay within the lines. And I'm going to explain that more. Don't judge it and let it take a long time, right? You can also do paint by number. There's tons of paint by number apps on phones. You can do jigsaw puzzles, right? This is why jigsaw puzzles are really soothing to people. So what you want to do is be filling in a predefined space, one you haven't defined. More sensory stuff you can try. Again, go through all your senses. Touch. That couch over there is a perfect meditation spot for me, because the minute I touch it, I'm soothed. It's so soft, and it's turquoise. So soft and turquoise. It's like a win-win. Going outside is great for sensory information, right? A change in scenery triggers the brain to work in a different way, but also going outside, being around more thriving life helps. Also, you can include in that mild meditation, or not mild meditation, mild exercise. You don't want to do strenuous exercise when triggered, because your muscles are already contracted. And this is how a lot of people self-injure. It's because your muscles are contracted, and then you're going to go contract them further, and you're going to tear a tendon or a ligament or something. And you're going to have a problem. So it's better to go for a walk, do a little yoga or Tai Chi, just stretching. Just muscle stretching is good. Just doing some stretching, doing deep breathing. If you're going to do breathing, deep breaths, slow deep breaths. No hatha, fire breath. You want to do a soothing breath, so deep breaths. If you're taking deep breaths, this is telling the brain that you're not in fight or flight anymore, because the breath becomes more rapid in fight or flight. So when you slow it down, you're telling the brain, oh, we're not in fight or flight anymore, and so it will trigger serotonin. So,
Joke books on this one.
No, don't try and make me laugh if I'm triggered. I will want to end a person. Right? If I'm in a triggered state and people try and make me laugh, doesn't go well. When you're triggered, nothing is funny. You're dying. You're being chased by a tiger. Nothing is funny about that. So yeah, that's definitely a phase 2 practice. Phase 2 is where we're triggering the prefrontal cortex. right? This is a purely human part of the brain. So this is where our human homeostasis is. I'll talk in future sessions, and if you take some of the more advanced classes, I'll talk about the potential future brain function of humans. But right now, it's really about breaking out of the primal function. We need to do that before we can get into advanced brain function. We need to break the primal pattern of fight or flight and rest and digest. So to do that, we are going to do practices that specifically trigger the prefrontal cortex. Learning new things. This is the part of our brain that where we're in a learning state. You can learn anything, but you have to be bad at it. Or it doesn't count. If you're good at it, it's phase 1. You have to be bad at it because it has to take your full concentration. So learn a new language, learn how to juggle, learn something complex like Tai Chi, learn advanced yoga, things like that. The second thing is, besides learning something new, is go someplace new. This is why vacations make us feel better, because the brain processes information differently when things are unfamiliar. Now you can hear that here's fight or flight, rest and digest, safety is in familiarity, right? But in humans, especially at 7.5 billion people, where nothing can stay the same, safety is in adaptability. That's the only time we really feel safe, is when we feel confident and capable. So we need to be firing that prefrontal cortex. So going new places, an easy way to do this is take different paths to and from work or places that you go on a regular basis. I always recommend geocaching. I love geocaching because it hits a lot of points. For people who don't know, that's spelled GEOCACHING. You can look it up online, but it's basically where you get GPS coordinates and go to a location and find a box, and people who have been there have signed it and left things. You can take trinkets, leave one, take one type of thing. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it's triggering connection to community, right? It's connecting to other people. The strongest placebo effect in humans is other human connection. This is why a lot of practices like acupuncture and things like that are actually more about human connection than they are where the needles go. So that's why things even like massage, energy work like that, things that connect us, touch, non-sexual, intimate touch from people is really powerful placebo effect in humans. So going someplace new. The other thing that I recommend is non-dominant handwork. Same rules, use your coloring book. And you're going to try and completely fill in the space and try to stay within the lines. Again, don't judge it. But you're going to be coloring with your non-dominant hand. You can do all sorts of things with your non-dominant hand. Lock and unlock doors. Try brushing your teeth. Maybe just not a good one for that. Also, you can look things up online. Anything that fires the prefrontal cortex. There are a lot of games. Lumosity, Neuronation, right? Things like that, apps for your phone that you can use that are specifically designed to make you have to think hard, because you can't ever beat the game. The games just get harder and harder the better you get at the game. This is a good thing too that you can do with puzzles, making them more complicated. So for example, for me, I played Sudoku to overcome insomnia by this exact practice, but I'm so good at it, I can pretty much do it in my sleep now, because it's just a system I follow now. So I would use Sudoku in phase 1 because I'm good at it. Crosswords, I'm horrible at. I never think of the clue the way the person who wrote the clue. I'm thinking verb, they're thinking noun. I mean, my brain doesn't work the same way. And I'm horrible at trivia. That's not the brain I have. My brain is strong in cognitive function, but non-critical memory, it just disposes of. And so so crossword puzzles are really hard for me, but when I do them, I know I'm working the brain and I don't judge myself. I'll go to the back of a crossword book and get a clue, and I go, okay, I just learned that thing. I didn't know what that clue was, but I just learned something. I may not retain it, but I learned it, right? But I want to do the thing that's hard in phase 2. Other things are exercise. So you can do more strenuous exercise here. I do recommend, if you have anxiety, don't do cardiovascular exercise. because you're reinforcing the overproduction of adrenaline. Every single time you have a panic attack, an anxiety attack, you're having a cardiovascular workout. And so to reinforce that is just causing more damage to the body. It's better to stay away from it until you can control your brain chemistry. If you suffer depression, do more cardiovascular. You're not having enough epinephrine release. Okay, so again, phase 2 is consciously engage with thoughts, feelings, emotions, sense of self, and be able to enter and maintain a centered state at will. So we're shrinking the amygdala to break the cycle. I recommend 3 times a day for 20 minutes if you have an enlarged amygdala. So if you're in a lot of states of suffering, 3 times a day. Right before sleep is important because, again, how your hippocampus is storing information is going to depend on that. I recommend when you first wake up because, again, that's an important time for the hippocampus as well. Last 20 minutes before you go to sleep, first 20 minutes when you wake up are critical. And then sometime middle of the day. If you don't have a high fight or flight response, once a day is plenty. And the next day I want to talk about is thriving. This is where we separate from primates. This is a purely human experience. I mean, a lot of things in nature can thrive. Thriving is not exclusive to humans, but how the human brain functions and responds to it is very different. So what happens when we enter a thriving state? Dopamine is released. Dopamine is often, just like serotonin, stated to be a feel-good chemical. It's better to think of serotonin as the chemical of safety and well-being, and dopamine as a success chemical, more than just a feel-good chemical, more than just a pleasure chemical. Now, when dopamine's released, we feel good. We feel good. We do feel pleasure, but again, it's not triggered by pleasure. The result of dopamine being released is pleasure. We feel peaceful. We're back to human homeostasis, and a lot of things happen in the body that I'm going to get into in detail. But ultimately, that feel good is the release of dopamine, which then we feel successful and valuable. So again, thinking of this as a success chemical more than a feel good chemical, a pleasure chemical, helps us to understand the power it has in our lives and in our brain function. At a physical level, what we're doing when we are able to finally return to homeostasis and be firing dopamine in a healthy way, we're actually shrinking the amygdala. There have been studies in neuroscience where they found with the right kind of practices, in 5 weeks, people shrink their amygdala enough to visibly see the difference. As small as the amygdala is, they can visibly see the difference. So it minimizes our fight or flight response. Our systems become fully engaged, which means we're healthy and regenerative. Our body heals. The body heals naturally. We're not trying to, like, miraculous healing isn't a miracle. Medical science doesn't dismiss it because it's a miracle. They dismiss it because it's commonplace. They say that the average person by the age of 40 has had and cured cancer in their body at least 4 times. Right? The body's constantly, right? If you cut your finger, it heals. If you break a bone, it heals. You know it'll do that. But it doesn't heal well if the systems are off because you're not producing enough stem cells. You're not regenerating the cells in the right way. They're not DNA, as well as everything else in the body when we're triggered, contracts. And so it's not going to be healthy cell regeneration. On a mental level, you'll feel successful and valuable. You feel clear, centered, capable, no longer subject to conditions. We feel confident, self-realized. At an emotional level, we have a low emotional response, right? This is often called emotional intelligence. We tend to live in our feeling body rather than our emotional body. This is a real differentiation between the amygdala and the insula, which I get into in deeper study. So we feel happy, healthy. We have empathy. We have compassion for people, but we aren't empathic. We don't experience other people's emotions and feelings, but we have compassion for them. It's basically a life of balance, thriving state. Okay, so again, thriving state, dopamine's released. We enter what I call human homeostasis, because this is the natural state of humans. I always tell people, think of the 3-year-old. You know, they don't have the fully mature brain developed yet that we get into when we start talking about the insula, but, you know, they're thriving, happy, you know, wanting to do the next thing, flexible, all of that stuff. And so that's the natural state. That's our organic state if we're not triggering. I will talk in future sessions about what I call the striving level, which is the next level of human development. And it's where we're innovative and motivated. I talk about it a lot in more of the advanced studies. This is where we're kind of getting more into around phase 3 and 4. So I won't cover it tonight, but I do want to mention it. I do really recognize that there's 4 states of consciousness. Okay, welcome back. So today, for our take-home tool, I want to connect to that idea I was talking about in the classes, where we have this ability to say, okay, am I experiencing life from a stress state, from an angry or suffering state? Am I experiencing life just, okay, yeah, I'm here, things are fine, but they're not spectacular? Or can I experience life from this place of thriving and joy and centeredness? And so I want to approach a practice that I teach that is a coloring practice to do this. And this is a really great practice to help understand how we can control the way the brain responds to outside stimulus. So we're going to start by talking about just regular coloring. So there are a lot of these coloring books out where they're the adult coloring books. They have mandalas, or they have detailed pictures with a lot of tiny spaces to color. A lot of these coloring books are actually marketed as anti-stress coloring books because they do calm the mind. But there are some rules that are important to follow when using these coloring books. And so I want to teach you those rules, and I want to talk about which one is doing what to the brain. So this can be, and it doesn't just have to be the coloring books. It can be anything that fills a predefined space. So it could be something like jigsaw puzzles. It could be something like paint by number. It could be easy craft projects like latchet hook rugs or pre-made craft projects. Knitting and crochet could fall into it, and knitting might be a little bit difficult, but something like crochet could, or needlepoint. So there are things where the picture's been predefined and you're just filling the space. And so I'm going to talk about coloring and how to do it specifically because it's pretty easy to address. So with the coloring books, there are a few rules I recommend when using the coloring book, and that is, number 1 is completely fill each space. You don't want to just scribble in and leave a bunch of background. You want to completely fill in the space. Try to stay within the lines. Now, I have some people that trigger a bit when I talk about staying within the lines because they feel like someone's trying to bind them. That's just a trigger from some past rule in your brain. So I'm going to ask you to try and push past that if you can. If not, then coloring's not going to be your thing. But I have you stay within the lines for a reason, because you want to pay attention to detail, and this helps with focus. So again, you're filling in the space, staying within the lines, and don't judge your work. If you go out of the lines, or if the colors aren't quite what you want, this isn't about the art you produce in the end. And you can throw the picture away when you're done if you want. It's about the brain function you're stimulating. So the last thing is you want to take your time. Don't try and finish a page in a day. You're not trying to rush. It's not about finishing. It's about the practice. You can take a whole month to do one coloring page, and that's really great. That's okay. That's what we want to do, is to make sure we're focusing in the right direction. We're focusing on the function and not on the outcome of the picture. Okay, so again, these are the rules. This is what you want to do. And what I'm going to have you do as you're doing the tool this week is I'm going to have you actually spend a day or two with that anytime you're feeling agitated or stressed, you sit down and color. This is a practice that's part of those early stages. So this is just a practice to stimulate that rest and digest state. This isn't a practice to take you beyond that. but it does stimulate that. So it's a great thing to use when you're stressed. So the way we shift this now, when we increase the practice to what I'm about to teach you in the next stage, in the next few practices, is to now switch to coloring with our non-dominant hand. Now, the reason why we do this is because we want to stimulate focus and concentration. So a lot of people, when they try to write with their non-dominant hand, will say things like, it looks like a little kid did it, which is not entirely true. What it looks like is someone who's never done it before did it. So when you were a kid, you didn't know how to write, so it looked like a kid did it. But if you've never written with your non-dominant hand, it looks the same way it would with anyone who's never learned to write. It doesn't have to do with age. It has to do with the fact that you don't have experience. But whenever you're learning something new, this is what's stimulating that prefrontal cortex, is digging into learning something new. We're going to review the practices I've talked about in that video, but we're going to break down each one like we did with the tools this week. And I'm going to talk about the ways to do each one and make sure you're doing it accurately to really stimulate the right brain function. So what you're doing at this point is you want to start making this an observation, a learning moment, a way of stimulating your brain to have to work hard. And so what you're going to be doing is using that non-dominant hand to do that. So, but you're going to follow those same rules. Stay within the lines, completely fill the space, take your time, don't be rushed, and don't judge your work. Those 4 rules are the most important part. So what you'll do in the tool this week is just spend a day or two with just the first one. And what I want you to do, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you checking in with yourself. So we're going to be using that feeling observation log. How do I feel when I start? How do I feel when I'm done? And that's the real practice, is how am I feeling when I start and when I finish? And then we're going to do the same when we switch to the non-dominant hand. And then as we go forward, I'm actually going to help you advance that coloring practice even further to start to stimulate even more advanced parts of the brain. So we're going to use this coloring as an example for that. All of the take-home tools in the next 12 weeks are going to be things to stimulate the prefrontal cortex and start to get you that feeling of what it feels like to be centered, and that is possible for us. When I was an addict, and even after I had quit using, I still had so much anxiety. I couldn't imagine just feeling calm and peaceful, especially around people that might otherwise trigger me or around situations. I really felt like it would always be a struggle, and to be free of that is beyond explanation. I cannot even put into words what it's like to be free of that. I will tell you this, it is so moving and so inspiring that I want to give it to everyone suffering addiction. I want you to be able to feel this way, where you don't care about what you were addicted to, where you can just go and live your life centered and happy and peaceful and free of suffering. So that's what this next 12 weeks introduces us to. So I think that's going to be it for today. Remember, let this be an observation. What you're doing is observing yourself, and then I will pepper in some opportunities to advance the practice toward the end of this 12 weeks. But I'll be giving you other things. So if coloring's not your thing, I'm going to be giving you a lot of practices to stimulate that prefrontal cortex. So I hope you enjoy the week, and I hope you feel the serious impact of what's possible through this exercise. As we move into the next 12 weeks, I'm really going to enjoy breaking down how this people that do cure their addiction, how they're doing it, and how to make it easy so that you can have that life I'm talking about. So until then, I hope you enjoy the journey, and I look forward to connecting with you along the way.